Are you taking care of yourself? I mean, really, what does self care mean to you and what does it mean for your relationships? That's what Heather Evans, my good friend Heather Evans, takes us to school about what it means and what it means for your relationships. Coach Drew. Hey everybody, Coach Drew here. Just scruffing it out. You see all this? All this salt and pepper, some people call it. This is me letting it all hang out. Haven't shaved in like what? A few days. No, this is just a few days. But this is also me just taking care of myself. This is one of the things that I do when I just don't want to do the do. You know what I'm saying? But self care is not just about bubble baths and tea and candles, although that's really important. My friend, Heather Evans, new to my world, but a woman I admire and respect, she talks a lot about what self care really is, and we get into how it impacts relationships. Check it out. Tell me a little bit about you. Like, how did you get into coaching? Where you come from? Like, who are you, Heather? Who are you?
Thanks. And I do want to say thank you for the time and this opportunity to connect with you again. I truly feel like this is a relationship that's building and will continue to build. So I grew up in a U.S. military family. So I was born in California, and growing up, we moved a lot. I'm going to be turning 41 here shortly, and I think I've moved about 40 times in my 40 years on this earth. And so it's given me a deep breadth of experience in a variety of cultures, communities, meeting different people. You know, we lived all over the United States. We lived abroad. I've had multiple experiences living in the Middle East, in Asia, and have traveled extensively throughout Europe. And growing up, I was a really sensitive kid. I was really sensitive. I could get overwhelmed easily. I would pick up on other people's emotions easily. Add to that a lot of moving and shifting and changing. And you had one very overwhelmed and anxious kid. And I honestly didn't really know how to cope with all of that growing up.
Right.
And, I've shared this in other spaces, but, I've struggled with anxiety. I struggled with eating disorders for over 20 years. And through the process of learning how to own my sensitivity, own my empathic superpowers, own the journey that I've been on, and seek the support and mentorship from people that I needed along the way, it really took me down this path of wanting to be in service. I've always been somebody who's wanted to help other people. I've always been the first one to volunteer. And all along my journey, I've been in service in one way or another.
Right.
And so, the pieces started coming together for me. I was living in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia with my husband. And at that point, I had left a nonprofit career where I was the national manager of diversity and inclusion. I had loved the work, but I hated what it was doing to my personal life. And I had achieved my yoga teacher certification. And I was in my work doing diversity and inclusion and then teaching yoga. I was noticing that people were coming to me not necessarily for those things specifically, but to talk about some of the personal challenges they were going through in their lives. So we were going above and beyond the conversations that were within the containers of diversity and inclusion and the container of yoga. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And people were coming to me essentially for coaching. So I had actually been doing coaching for years prior to achieving my certification and doing the studies to become a certified coach. So yeah, I just remember I was in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and I was having one of these conversations with somebody that I was doing a one-on-one coaching session with, and something clicked. I said, I am in alignment right now.
Mm.
I'm in my flow. I'm feeling everything come together. I'm feeling energized and excited, and I'm passionate about this. I'm like, oh, and these are all of the feelings that I want to be happening every single day in my life. Hang on a second. Let's actually make this something.
Hmm.
And so that's how I became a certified coach and came to the place where I'm doing the work I'm doing now.
And it's so obvious to me that you're not only doing the work with other people,
Mhm.
you have done and are doing the work in yourself, because I come from an experience of anxiety as well.
Yes.
And that when I listen to you and I watch you on your YouTube videos and I see you on Instagram, and I know it's impossible to capture somebody's entire story, but the essence of you is so strong, so stable, so ready to give so much. No one would ever, imagine that you grew up feeling anxious and unsure. And the work that you do to show up and be present,
Mhm.
um, is that all self-care?
I would argue that it is, right? So I'm a self-care and empowerment coach. And I truly believe that in order to prioritize your self-care, it starts with your core values.
Mm,
So whenever I'm working with somebody, the first question I'm going to ask is, what are your core values?
yeah.
And by the way, if we don't know, there's an exercise that we go through to get clarity on what the core values are. And then in looking at those core values, I then ask the question, what are the feelings those core values give you?
Mm,
Right? So in my coaching practice, because so much of my experience has been about the body and getting back in touch with the body and my feelings and sensations that are happening, because I believe the body contains so much wisdom that we are programmed to ignore.
mm, mhm.
I want to encourage people to get back in touch with the thoughts, feelings, and sensations that they're having in their body. So, we look at those core values and we go, okay, what are the feelings those core values give you? Or what are the feelings you want those core values to give you? And then we start looking at, okay, so are the things you're doing giving you those feelings every day? And if you're doing things that are giving you those feelings every day, that's self-care. That's self-care. That's personal empowerment. Because if you're living in alignment with your core values, if you're getting those feelings and sensations every day that you desire, then you're living in alignment with your truth. And let me tell you something, when you live in alignment with your truth, things become easier. I can tell you from personal experience, my overwhelm decreases, my anxiety level decreases, my stress levels decrease. When those things decrease,
Mm,
that's self-care,
right,
right?
right.
If you're living in a constant level of stress and overwhelm and anxiety, you've got to be taking a look at, what are the things I'm doing in my life? Am I living in alignment with my core values? And if we're not, then some shifts need
Mm,
to happen, right? We need to make some choices, and you always have a choice about your self-care.
right,
I can, one example, coffee. I love coffee. Love it. I mean, this is like a really simple example, but
right.
I love coffee,
Mm,
but I'm acutely aware of
yeah.
what coffee does to my system. As a highly sensitive person, I'm aware that if I drink a cup of coffee, chances are my levels of anxiety are going to go up. My levels of feeling overwhelmed are going to go up. I've noticed this. It's a pattern in my system, right? So I get to choose, am I having the coffee that day, knowing what the potential outcome is, or am I not? Should I choose something else? And if I choose the coffee, I have to take ownership and responsibility for that.
Right. So I have a question for you, Heather.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I too deal and work with a lot of core value stuff.
Yes.
I'm there with you. I'm curious about the emotion piece,
Mm-hmm.
because we can want more than one thing. So how do you help people to decide which want to go with. Like, I want the coffee, but I want, the kind of grounded, or, the more consistent level of energy, or whatever it is. How do you help people decide?
I ask people, what are the priorities, right? So my priority on a particular day might not necessarily be related to having the cup of coffee or not. So one of the practices that I have is in the morning, I write down a list of 3 non-negotiables for my day. These are 3 things that I'm going to accomplish every day. This is part of my self-care, right? And these are achievable things because I want to feel successful at the end of every day. I want to have those feelings in my life every day, right? So these 3 things are directly related to my core values. They're directly related to how I want to feel and those feelings that my core values give me. Those are my priorities.
Yeah.
Having a cup of coffee isn't going to impact those. Okay, I might really enjoy that cup of coffee. If it is going to impact those things happening, then I have to make a choice. And this really is about ownership. It's honestly, it's about knowing yourself so well that you are super aware of, is this in alignment with what I need today in order to get those feelings? And again, Drew, for me, it comes down to choice. I can't prioritize for any of my clients or anybody that I speak to what they're going to go after on any particular day or what feelings they want to have in their life. But I can help give them tools to make them aware of, you have a choice in the matter. You get to choose. And by the way, this is one of my other rules for, it's a rule that's not a rule. Core values shift and change depending on your life circumstances. Nothing is written in stone. I always say things are written in sand. You can erase it, you can wipe it away and redraw something if you want to. So when it comes to how do people choose, or how do we start working to discern the wants, it comes down to, how do these things make you feel? And the recognition that you have a choice. You get to discern, does this take me down a path of living my core values? Does this take me down a path of getting those feelings I want? Or in your discernment, does it take me in another direction? And by the way, either decision is fine, but recognize that you're making the decision. Recognize that you are making the choice in that moment.
Right. There's a lot of power in the ownership and the awareness that I have the ability to choose, whether that means taking responsibility for the outcome or choosing in the moment to adjust and to erase the plan. I really like what you're talking about in terms of setting 3 things for your day that are non-negotiable, that are actually attainable that day, which is really, really important, because then you do end up feeling accomplished. And I know in my school of thought and growing up, trusting our emotions is something that on one level we are taught not to do, but on another level, that's what we do. Like, we go with them, but we don't always understand them. So I really like the word discernment, because that invites that intentionality, that thinking about what it is that you're feeling. And then when you said prioritizing, there's such power in owning what matters most to you.
Yeah, and when we don't do that, by the way, we give our power away. We give our power away to other people.
Right.
We give our power away to things. We give our power away to situations.
Right.
If you are living in alignment with your core values, you're not giving your power away. And nobody can take your power away from you.
Right. Yeah.
You have to speak your truth. Yeah.
And, my mind is going fast and furious in a number of different directions. So let me slow it down and ask a couple questions, because I want to come to some relationship stuff.
Yes.
First, for some people who are not as familiar with core values, can you dig into that a little bit and help us understand, when you say core values, what exactly do you mean?
So the way I define core values is that they are your guiding principles. They are the things that are most important to you in your life, that if you could have them every day, that's what you want. And I always encourage people, make a list of between 5 and 10. Have at least 5 on your list. Some people love long lists of core values. I like between 5 and 10. I think it keeps it compact enough that you can actually get those things into your life. So the way that I work through this with people is, and I have an exercise that I go through, is we look at, okay, what are the things that are most important to you in your life? So as an example, I love adventure. I love to travel. I love to explore. I love being in new places and meeting new people. And I love being there for a longer period of time so I can immerse myself a little deeper into that new place. So adventure is important to me. What feelings does that give me? It gives me a sense of freedom, gives me a sense of empowerment. There's fun, there's excitement, there's variation of the unknown, right? So there's all these things that it gives me.
Right.
And then how do I get that every day? Well, right now I have a 21-month-old at home. The opportunities to travel have not been as great. So what I've committed to doing, and again, sometimes this goes on my list of 3 non-negotiables, is I try to find out something new about the area I live in at least once a day, whether it's a new event, a new store that I haven't been to, a different hike that I haven't taken.
Wow.
So I try to find something new. And then what I do is I go, okay, these are the things that are important to me. These are the feelings it gives me. These are the tiny activities I could do on a daily basis to get some of that in my life. Now I'm going to go back and say, is this really what I would define as a core value? Is this something that I want in my life every single day?
Mm.
If it is, it goes on my core values list. So if adventure is that important to me and I want it as part of my everyday, and I want to do an activity every day, a small one, to ensure that it gets to be part of my life, then it goes on my core values list.
Right.
And usually that's where I see people start to condense. That's where we start to get between 5 and 10. Once you've got that list, those become your compass. Those become your guideposts.
Right.
And what you can do with those core values is anytime you're faced with a question, anytime you're faced with a new opportunity, anytime you're in relationship with somebody, what you can ask yourself is this bringing more of my core value into my life?
Mm-hmm.
So I might look at my work schedule and go, okay, I'm seeing any workation with somebody on something else. If I take on this additional project, does that leave time for adventure
Mm-hmm.
every day? If not, then I have to discern, do I want to go down that path or not? I've got to make sure that how I'm living my life is in alignment with my core values.
Right. And it helps you to find that balance.
Yes.
Based on knowing yourself, what's important to you, what that gives to you, because
Yes.
that sets up to be prepared to give to others.
Yes.
Which is my next question.
Yeah.
Because you are the go-to for me about self-care. And I want to know, in your experience with people, how does, I mean, literally, the lack of self-care impact relationships?
I see it all of the time. So, and I was reflecting a bit on this over the past couple of days because it is a theme that's coming up right now. When we don't take care of ourselves, when we don't know what our core values are, when we aren't living in alignment with our truth, what can happen in relationship is we pivot to the other person to deliver all of that for us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not taking care of myself, so I'm going to look to you in relationship, whether it's a friend, a partner, a spouse, a coworker, a boss, right? Whatever.
Whoa, wait. Let's slow down for a moment. Because that's big. What I'm hearing you say is, if I don't take care of myself, I'm going to pivot. I'm going to turn to somebody else
To provide that for you.
and expect them to do for me
Yep.
what is my job to do for myself.
Yes. And here's the tricky part about that. When we pivot to somebody else, all of a sudden we're in alignment with their self-care. We're not living in alignment with our self-care, with our values. We're effectively giving our power away.
So,
by the way, when we do that, that's an immense burden on the other person. I'm going to make you responsible for my self-care. We don't say this actively, right? It's very much a subconscious thing that we're doing. But we turn to somebody and we're going, I'm depending on you for my happiness.
mm-hmm.
I'm depending on you for my adventure. I'm depending on you for my cup of coffee. I'm depending on you for my well-being.
Right.
And because this isn't actively communicating, we keep asking for it in different ways. And if it doesn't get fulfilled, resentment starts to build. And when resentment starts to build, we know what happens. Things start to crack.
And I can only imagine what that does and how that impairs the other person's ability to care for themselves. Because if they're tending to your expectations, your needs, and it's doubly hard if they don't even know what those are because you haven't labeled them.
Yeah, if we're not clear on it.
Right? Wow.
And here's the other thing. If the other person has turned to you for their self-care, you've got two people looking at each other for self-care, and neither person is taking care of themselves.
So where does this idea come from that the other person is supposed to take care of us? Like, isn't that what relationships are about? Like, I'm in this relationship, I got you, you got me,
Yep.
and we both got that way, right?
Do you know, it is this, there are levels of love. And I think a majority of us have been programmed, whether it's through romantic comedies, Cosmo articles, you know, what society tells us at large, that it's an exchange.
Mm-hmm.
I give you this, you give me this in return, right? You give me this grand gesture, I'll show up for you this way. And that's actually not how love works. That's actually, and when I say love, again, I'm talking about all relationships, parent, child, spouse, partner, boss. In my opinion, anybody you come across that you're in relationship with, you treat them as though they are the divine, right? So that's love. That is putting love as a value on every relationship you're in.
Okay.
And so, you know, I think this construct is, you give me this, I'll give you that in return. And again, that's not how love works. Love is respect for the person. Love is letting another person own their process. Love is owning your process. Love is owning, and you and I have talked about this, love is owning your stuff and being able to communicate that to somebody. And by the way, we do need one another from time to time, right? I need support from in fact, I crave support from my husband.
Right.
I feel loved when he shows up for me. And I have at times had to say to him, the support I need from you right now is this.
Right.
But I have to take ownership of what I need, because that's self-care, and I have to be able to articulate it because that's self-care.
My mind is blowing up right now in light of some connections that I'm making that you're talking me through and walking me through, because when we expect others to do for us what we are capable of and intended to do for ourselves, we're doing both of us a disservice.
There you go.
I'm really trying to figure out where I got this, you know, this idea in my head that you do for me, I do for you, and that's how we are healthy. I mean, it's pretty deep, because on a number of levels, I'm aware that the reality is a relationship is only going to be as strong as the individuals are emotionally healthy.
Yeah.
And an emotionally healthy individual is going to, like you said, own their stuff and be able to identify what their stuff is and take care of their stuff.
Yes.
But I didn't realize how integral self-care is and what that actually means. I think I've been defining it differently.
Mm.
Yeah, that's good. That's good, Heather. That's good. It's good
And
stuff.
I also think that there is space for collective self-care. So I know that you've participated in some men's groups, and I'm part of some women's circles. And, you know, these are also relationships. And I'm not saying that we have to do self-care alone. What I'm saying is, can we find the spaces where we can navigate our self-care process? If that's with your partner, with your boss, with a friend, that's amazing. If it's in men's circles, if it's in women's circles, that's amazing, right? Because sometimes we do need to work it out with someone else.
Yeah, no doubt.
And that's why I call it having your personal board of directors, whether it's a mentor, a coach, a therapist, who you can say, hey, I need to check in on my self-care.
Yeah.
I need to figure out if I'm living in alignment with my core values, right?
Yeah.
Because if we're not doing that work for ourselves, then we're expecting others to do it for us. And that doesn't work.
Right. Yeah.
And I say this because I let other people do my work for such a long time.
And they didn't do a good job, right?
You know what? They did an awesome job at asking me to live in alignment with their values and their self-care. It wasn't mine, though. Yeah. And because of that, I lost my voice. I gave away my power, which led to anxiety, overwhelm, eating disorders, because I couldn't cope. I was not living in my own truth. I was reading everybody else's script because I was so dependent on everybody else for my self-care. And by the way, I didn't know this at the time. This is a lot of work later. But now that I have taken ownership of my self-care, now that I'm clear on what my core values are, now that I can recognize, sorry, Dave, my husband, I've been dependent on you for my self-care for a little bit. I need to walk that back and come back to myself. Yeah. Again, things are much more easeful. Things can flow in my life because I'm actually speaking my script. I'm speaking my truth. And I'm not exhausting the other people around me.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that's drilling down for me in this moment is the why of the self-care. Because sometimes in theory, we adopt self-care habits and rituals, but we do it so that we can do other things. Like, I got to take care of myself so I can do this thing.
Yeah.
But self-care in and of itself, for the purpose of self, and you highlighted, interacting with others like they are the divine. And I think it's important that we honor ourselves in that same way, and because we are filled with equal value. I mean,
yes,
innate,
yes,
intrinsic. So it's not that you take care of yourself so that you can do. You take care of yourself so you can be who you are, and that's the beauty of you, right?
Yes, exactly. You take care of yourself so you can be.
Yeah.
You actually don't have to do anything. Right. I think the way that you just encapsulated all of that is so spot on. I think it's the perfect way to describe exactly what we've been working through. And I also think it's important for people to recognize that self-care is a process. It's not always going to look the same, right? So, when I'm working with people who are exploring this idea of self-care for the first time, I offer invitations. right? I never assign homework to my clients. I don't believe in it.
Right.
I offer invitations because it has to resonate with the person. And I say, if this invitation doesn't resonate, don't do it. If you weren't feeling it, don't do it. Now, you might be moving outside of your comfort zone, which is sometimes what self-care is, right? That's another thing. I think it's really important to say, sometimes self-care is uncomfortable because, because sometimes self-care means saying no to things you would have normally said yes to. Sometimes self-care is breaking habits and patterns. So sometimes self-care is saying yes to something you wouldn't have normally said yes to. Self-care, it's not, I want to be really clear. Self-care is not bubble baths and rainbows and kittens and Netflix binges. And maybe that is part of it for some people, but the self-care I'm talking about is the deeper inner work. And it is not always comfortable. It is about excavation. It is about asking yourself some hard questions. Why are these the habits and patterns I'm doing? How have these habits and patterns served me? Are they continuing to serve me? Does something need to change? Do relationships need to change? I mean, we want to talk about self-care and relationships. You start taking care of yourself. Trust me, your relationship dynamics will change.
Yeah, I 100. I hear that and I agree. I love it. Because often when we think about emotions, myself included, I get a little scared when we think, okay, go with the emotion, because the assumption is it's going to be a pleasant feeling emotion. Like it's going to feel pleasant. And if it feels good, do it. But we know sometimes in order to get to the next level, to break through our own glass ceilings, we will feel uncomfortable.
Yes. And this is again where discernment comes in. So I like to discern, is this discomfort going to send me into overwhelm and anxiety? If it is, smaller steps, if that's the path I choose to go down. If this is uncomfortable because I'm feeling excited, or I'm testing a new edge, or, oh, this is something I've never tried before, I'm going to give it a go. I might be a little uncomfortable, but I'm going to give it a go. Then I'm saying yes to it if it's in alignment with my truth. So there's two types of discomfort that we experience. I mean, there's such a range of discomfort, but these are like bracketing here.
Right.
So again, I ask people to drop into the sensations in their body because our bodies don't lie to us. There's a reason why go with your gut is a saying, and that's referring to the sensations we have in our body. And if we can begin to discern those sensations, discern the wisdom of our body and say, okay, is this anxiety and overwhelm and stress producing? Do I need to move slower or not go down that path at all? Or is this discomfort because of something exciting? Then we start that finessing of self-care. And that's why it's a journey, because that changes and shifts depending on where you are in your life,
right?
The things you're engaged in, right? Some of the things that I do for my self-care now with a 21-month-old at home are radically different from anything I was doing before I had a child, right?
Right, yeah. I love it. I mean, I could sit here and talk to you all day.
I know.
So I'm going to get into my last question.
Yes.
Which is around apologies and self-care.
Yep.
And what comes to mind for you when I mention those two things together?
Yeah. I think, I mean, you are the expert on apologies, and anybody who hasn't read your book needs to. I think people view apologies as a negative, that if I apologize, I am detracting from myself in some way, or I'm giving something up. If you practice the art of the genuine apology, you are actually gaining so much more. You're gaining a self-awareness. You're situating yourself. You're taking ownership for what's yours. When we have that capacity to own our stuff in the midst of apology, you're actually tuning into your inner wisdom, which is inherently self-care. You know, I've been doing some of the work with my own relationship based on some of the work in your book. And now that I'm tuning more into, okay, why am I apologizing? Is it genuine? What's my responsibility in the apology? It's empowering.
Mm-hmm.
When we're empowered, we're taking care of ourselves. At the same time, apologies have to come with healthy boundaries. And
Yeah.
healthy boundaries is another thing I talk a lot about.
Mm-hmm.
If you are apologizing from a genuine place, there are healthy boundaries that are established within the apology, where you are not taking ownership for everything, you are taking ownership for your part. As somebody who is a reformed apologizer, because I used to take on responsibility for everything, forgetting that there were two people in the dynamic, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I would just take it all on. I'd say, yep, all of this is me. I'm clearly responsible for all of this and how it went down. And by the way, this would happen in work situations where I would take responsibility for what happened with the team. This would happen in partnerships. This would happen with family members where I would just say, yep, I'm responsible. I'm responsible. I'm responsible. I had no healthy boundaries because I would just take it all on for myself, even though that wasn't the truth. When I got clear on, okay, this is what I'm responsible for in this dynamic. This is the pain I've caused. This is the action I took. I can then start to establish healthy boundaries as I apologize, where I can say, I see that this is mine, but I can also recognize what's yours. And that for me, when we're talking about apologies, it's those healthy boundaries that come with a genuine apology that make all the difference.
Right.
And if you have those healthy boundaries in place, if somebody comes back and says, no, and you did this and this and this and this and this, if that healthy boundary is in place, you can hear it and receive it. But if you know that it's not your truth, you won't take ownership of it.
Right.
Because you know what's yours. And that's self-care.
Wow. You summed it up. You said it so well. I'm eating it up. I'm loving it up. I agree 100%. I mean, there's so much we talked about today. We talked about you and how you came into alignment with the work, and you're working and doing your ongoing work for yourself so you can show up with all the people that you help from all around the world. Like literally, you are helping people to still in touch with people all around the world. I love it. I love being in touch with you because in that way, I'm also connected. I'm being informed by you and I'm loving it. I'm loving the core values. I mean, some of the key takeaways for me is self-care is integral to your health as an individual, but also what you give and what you bring to relationships. And it's about that self-awareness, your body, your mind, your spirit, the discernment of it all filters into self-care. And then we can then negotiate those boundaries, whether we're talking about things we want to accomplish in the day or things we want to experience with others. I love how all encompassing it is, as well as how very concrete and practical that you make it.
Yeah, it has to be practical. It has to be.
Yeah, but a lot of the things that we endeavor to do, it's difficult to make it practical.
Yes.
And I think that's the beauty of coaching, that you respectfully invite people into discerning what's the practical pieces that they can do today that holds the most meaning for them.
Yes.
So I want to know, one, how can people reach you? And number two, what are you working on right now that is probably maybe the most exciting thing that you want people to know about?
For sure. So you can get in touch with me at heatherevanscoaching.com. There's a link where you can contact me. I do offer people a free one-on-one session. So if any of this has resonated with you, if you want to dig a little deeper into the core values piece of your life, or if you just want to talk about your own self-care and personal empowerment, you can schedule one of those one-on-one sessions with me. And it's you, me, 1 hour talking about things that are important to you and the shifts you want to make in your life. You can also find me on Instagram at Heather Evans Coaching and on YouTube at Heather Evans Coaching. So those are my primary platforms. In terms of projects that I'm working on, 2 very exciting things. One is the Inner Fire membership program. Super excited to be launching this. It has been a long time in the making. And maybe we can include a link for this, but it's a membership program where each month we will be doing a deep dive into a particular topic using video courses. We're going to have 2 group coaching calls per month, and these are hot seat coaching calls. So you can apply to sit in the hot seat where we will talk about you and what you're working on. And as part of this membership program, there is a piece where we talk about our core values. I walk you through that exercise that I spoke about earlier in our conversation, but I also introduce you to my self-coaching model, TRACE. And TRACE is a self-coaching model that I have developed after working with people around the world. And I often have people ask me, you're a coach, why are you teaching people to coach themselves? And it's because I firmly believe in personal empowerment. So the foundation of this membership program is utilizing the TRACE model with these specific topics that we do a deep dive into each month. There are worksheets, video modules. It's a really comprehensive program. The other thing about this program is that it is pay what you can. So there are 3 tiers of monthly membership, and that is based on your access to resources. So please be sure to check that out. Super excited. And we're launching that in January. So the monthly content begins in January, but there is a ton of introductory material. You could get started right now. The other thing that I'm working on is actually in collaboration with another coach. Her name is Melissa Steganis. She's a mindfulness coach. And we are working on the creation of an online summit that is going to be happening February 20th through 22nd. It's called the Vision Summit. And we are going to be featuring 18 speakers from around the world to talk about self-care, personal empowerment, and manifestation. So stay tuned for more information on that as well.
Wow, you're in a whole lot of big.
There's a lot happening.
That everyone can access. That is awesome.
Yes.
That's really awesome.
Yes, it's very intentional. Very intentional.
Thank you so much, Heather, for joining me and for sharing with the subscribers or people who come to my channel. And Heather's information will be right here below this video. So by all means, please connect with her. And I am sure we will have more conversations, and I look forward to each and every one of them.
Well, thank you so much, Drew. Really, I'm one of your biggest fans. I'm there with the pom-poms in the front row for you. And I genuinely appreciate our conversations and the dialogue we're having. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's an honor. I appreciate it. All right. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
As you can see, there's so much to self-care. Understanding your core values, understanding your values, knowing where the limits are, what's your responsibility and what's not your responsibility. That really impacts relationships. It impacts our world. It impacts our functioning, how we experience the world. And one of the things that impacts, how we experience the world is our degree of anxiety and how we deal with uncertainty in our lives, and that can really impact our relationships, and that's what we get into in the next video. I'll see you then.